Hello everybody, welcome back to Healthy Hump Day. Here with Dr. Shannyn Pearce and myself, Dr. Donald Miller. And we're here with Mill Pond Integrative Health and Wellness and the Wellness Way. And today's topic, we're going to be talking about gluten. So gluten's a big topic, guys. There's a lot of people out there that are trying to be gluten-free. Should I be gluten-free? Should I not? Just because I don't have celiac disease, should I still avoid gluten, right? So there's a lot of questions out there surrounding gluten. And so first, I kind of just want to talk about what is gluten? Right? Where is it found? So
first, we're gonna laugh the whole time. He gets really nervous every time he has to say Healthy Hump Day because he gets so nervous that he's gonna say it wrong. So I can see the fear go through his eyes right before he.
Did I not say Healthy Hump Day this time?
No, you did. But you always have that second pause before you do
What do we call this again?
I had to get that out. I would laugh the whole time.
And I'm probably talking a little loud because I've had this fluid on my ears for the last few days. It's just driving me nuts. But anyways, guys, we're happy to have you guys here. For those of you that are jumping on, guys, click the share button. There's a lot of people out there that need the information that we share with you guys. So gluten, what is gluten? So gluten's a protein, and it's a really sticky protein that's found in certain grains. And so the main grains that you find gluten in is wheat, barley, rye, and spelt.
Yep.
Okay, and so obviously if you're eating those grains, you're going to be consuming a lot of gluten. But the tricky thing is because it's such a sticky protein, manufacturers love to use this as a binding agent, right? And so, for example, they'll use it to bind the ingredients together to make flour. They love it because it will stop sauces and soups and different things from curdling up. They also love it because it kind of makes things a smooth texture, like cheese sauces, different dips, dressings, a lot of different condiments that we're consuming. It's just really, really high in gluten. And so, because manufacturers love it so much, what the growers have done is they've genetically tweaked the way that these grains are grown to be much higher potency of this sticky protein, right? And so I've got a list of just some things because obviously if you're eating bread that's wheat, a lot of people, well, I'm not eating white bread, I'm eating whole wheat bread. Well, you're still consuming a lot of this very, very sticky protein. And if you think about it, guys, if it's sticky enough to hold ingredients together, just imagine what it does inside the gut when you consume it. I mean, it's just very sticky. It's like glue in your system, right? And so some things that it hides in. So alcohols. Alcohol is fermented. Most alcohols are fermented from different grains. So a lot of your beers, a lot of your whiskeys and bourbons, I know all your bourbon lovers out here in Kentucky don't want to hear this, but one thing I enjoy a little bit of bourbon every once in a while. I just don't do it anymore because how the impact of gluten and how it makes you feel and what it does to your gut. And so pretty much most alcohols, unless they're potato-based or fruit-based, are going to have traces of gluten in it. Condiments like ketchups and mustards and barbecue sauces and all these things, they're going to really be high in gluten as well, and you don't really think about that, right?
And the hard part is, too, they don't have to necessarily label it because they use it as an additive, so preservatives or additives, all of those things can also mean gluten. That's where it's tricky. You're trying to cut these things out, and you're wondering where you're getting reactions to. It's somewhere, unfortunately tricky like that.
Exactly, yep. Chewing gum is another big one. I didn't even realize. Yeah, a lot of chewing gums because of the consistency of the product. They want to put the gluten in it just to make it the way it is. Things that we don't think about, a lot of places when they're frying your food, they're frying breaded foods in the same grease that they fry your French fries or your certain fried vegetables. And so, those of you that are, and Dr. Shann's going to talk more about this, but those of you that do have a true allergy to it and have things like celiac disease, you really need to be careful because these restaurants are frying gluten-containing products in the same oil that they'll do like a French fry. For even some of these restaurants, they say, well, we take a potato, we cut the potato up, and then we fry it. We're not going to talk about what the oil that they're frying it in right now, but that aside, the gluten's getting into that oil after they're doing the breaded products and things like that. So just got to be real careful because it hides everywhere.
So true. And now there is a big difference. I know a lot of people will ask, actually just talked with a lady yesterday, and I asked her what she wants a little bit more information on when we sit down and have our chats, and she's like, I have no idea what gluten is. I hear everyone say to avoid it, that I shouldn't have it, it's bad for me, but I have no idea why. I try and avoid it just because I hear it's good, but I don't think people, not necessarily everybody understands why it's bad for you, what it does, and what the difference is from gluten just not being good for you to somebody who has a condition like celiac disease or a true gluten sensitivity. all of those still should avoid gluten. To be honest, I really truly feel like that is one food that pretty much nobody should be consuming, because whether you have an allergy to it or not, there are just things it does in your body that is not healthy for us. So let's kind of break down a little bit the difference between, so somebody who has celiac disease, they actually have an autoimmune response to gluten. There are changes going on in their gut lining, and it's an autoimmune condition due to gluten typically. So that one is the most major one. And most of those people who have celiac disease, although it is pretty lowly diagnosed, there's probably a lot of you who have it that don't realize that you do, but those people who do know that they have that, they're usually pretty careful. They typically know the things like the restaurant and what things it's hiding in, so they can stick away from it, but they'll tell you flat out too. There's sometimes they'll have a meal that they think is clean, and then they'll pay for it for days because gluten is hidden in so many things. So that is one situation. If you are somebody who has a true autoimmune condition to gluten like celiac, that's one situation. But where we really focus on is kind of the even lower levels of that, the people who maybe don't have that autoimmune response, but that are still getting negative side effects from things like gluten. So if you do end up having, we do a lot of food allergies. It's one of our favorite tests to run on people, because then we're seeing what your body is truly saying isn't good for you. And majority of the time wheat comes up. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah,
I mean, it is so rare. Even when it doesn't come up, I'm always shocked. I'm like, I cannot believe you don't have this. But then right away, my very next statement is, just because wheat is not on your allergy list, we are still avoiding gluten. We just are, because it's not good for you. Now, you might be the person who could have a little bit more cheat days and not pay for it, but on a day in, day out, part of a healthy eating, you should not be consuming gluten. Because let me explain to you what it does to your body. When you have gluten of any kind, so from rye, barley, spelt, wheat, whatever, it gets into your digestive system, and when it gets into your gut lining, it releases a protein called zonulin, or a chemical called zonulin. What that does is it allows these little holes to open up in your gut. It's called intestinal permeability. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But it makes those little holes open up. Now, traditionally, most people, once that zonulin is released, their gut lining will open up those little holes for 24 to 48 hours, and then they'll go back and seal again, and they have kind of that open, close, open, close. But now, if you add in that maybe you're eating gluten more than every 24 to 48 hours, so most of you are having it every single day, if not every other day, but then you add in inflammation, or you add in some other food allergies, or you add in bacteria in your gut lining, or yeast, or other things that are also creating inflammation of that gut, well, now you run into a situation that instead of your gut lining opening and closing every 24 hours, it stays permanently open, and that's what we call intestinal permeability, which is leaky gut. A lot of people know that term. That's actually something that we're going to talk about in the next couple of weeks, because I think it's another kind of word that people use a lot, leaky gut, but they don't really understand what causes it and how to get rid of it. But what we do know is we know two things for certain when it comes to leaky gut: what causes those openings, those holes in your digestive system, and we know through research for certain that gluten is one of those things. So whether you're allergic to it or not, it has that same response in your body, and once you have that intestinal permeability, you are creating just systemic inflammation. You are setting yourself up to have chronic pain, to have digestive issues, to have all the other things that inflammation can cause, happens from, in large part, to that intestinal permeability. So we want to make sure we're avoiding gluten pretty much completely, and if you have a wheat allergy, or you have celiac, or something that you've actually seen on a test that you actually have an allergy to that, well, then we're avoiding it completely. I know for myself, that's one of the biggest ones that I just can't cheat on. Like, it is not worth it for me to go and have gluten. I'll pay for it for days. The next day I'll wake up and my eyes will be swollen and my body will feel puffy, and I will just feel terrible for at least 48 hours. And it's probably about that time that my gut lining's open and things are getting into my bloodstream, and I feel bad for that amount of time. So it's not worth it. And I know it's hard at first to give these things up, because we're so ingrained that, you need to have pasta or have a side dish of something, or everyone has their breads, or everyone says, well, how do you make a sandwich? There are other ways to make a sandwich without wheat bread. Absolutely. There really is. But it's figuring out what those differences can be. So we've established that I think everybody should be off gluten. If you follow our Through the Wellness Way, our anti-inflammatory diet is gluten-free. It's just across the board for everybody. So now we want to teach you how to make that manageable. So how to actually be able to live a life that you don't feel like you're deprived of all the things you love, but being careful not to get that gluten. So
before you do that, Dr. Shannyn, I just want to see what happens, guys, is when you go through these phases where you're eating this gluten and it's doing this damage to your gut lining, when the gut lining is porous and you have foods that are leaking through the gut, now you're going to be susceptible to developing allergies towards good foods, right? So if you're eating healthy diet, if you're eating your spinach and your broccoli and your cauliflower, then those foods are going to be leaking through your gut, and now all of a sudden you're going to have allergies toward those. And so that, again, that's why it's so important that to get started, we absolutely need to test your food allergies, because we do need to remove all the foods that you have allergies to, or it's just going to continue that process.
Yep, until your gut is healed.
Until your gut
get
is
rid
healed
of that
and sealed.
process. And that's another video we'll do. I know people have a lot of questions about that. Why we test food allergies. There's a lot of different things. If you Google it, and people saying, well, it's not valid, and then people saying it's the best thing ever. We are firm believers that food allergies are a very valid test and something that everyone needs to do if you want to get the quickest results possible, because they really help with healing. So that is another piece of after you remove the gluten and the food allergies to allow that gut to heal. I know for certain that I see patients of mine who will actually adhere to their food list pretty much 100% will get results a whole lot faster than the ones who keep cheating on it and keep having kind of those cheat days and those mess ups. So it's definitely worth it.
Absolutely, yeah. So let's talk about what changes we can make. And I know a big one's probably going to be like flours, right?
Yeah.
So talk about that. What kind of flours can we use?
There's tons. You can use coconut flour, you can use almond flour, you can use cashew flour. Each of them kind of has their own what they're better for too. So if you're just new to starting to cook with gluten-free type flours, you might mess a couple recipes up. I remember several times that things just wouldn't hold together and it would fall apart and it gets frustrating. But it still tastes good. Eat it with a fork. It still tastes well, but it just doesn't hold together as well because we don't have the gluten, which is the sticky part. So it's okay. Not everything's going to maybe come out the exact same as it would, but they're still delicious. So I know coconut flour is really good for things like pancakes, stuff that you want to have more like that fluffy consistency. Coconut flour is great for that. Now, coconut flour is definitely not a 1-to-1 ratio with regular flour. It's very absorbent. So you need very little coconut flour when you're making a recipe. So sometimes people will try and just switch out if it calls for regular flour and switch it out right away for coconut flour, and things get really... It's like a pasty steak, that's not what you're supposed to do. So there are tons of things. You can Google it. What are the ratios? I think it's about a 1/4 cup coconut flour to 1 cup of regular flour, but you can look that up. But I use coconut flour mostly for those types of things. I don't like it as much for baking. Like if you're going to try and make like a muffin or a cookie, I much prefer to use cashew or almond flour for that. I just feel like they hold together better. And the flavor is a little bit different as well. Where coconut flour is a little bit more bland, I feel like cashew and almond flour is a little bit sweeter. It's better for those things that you want to bake to actually make them sweet tasting. So those are my 3 favorite flours, and they're really easy to find now. Here's the greatest thing. Over the last couple of years, all of our general grocery stores have started carrying a lot more of these products. They used to be hard to find, and now they're not, and the cost has really come down on them. So they're more affordable to be using as well. But
so if it says gluten-free, it's okay?
I love that one. Just because it says gluten-free does not mean it's healthy for you,
right.
Nor does it. I have patients all the time. They'll come in with like cookies, and they're like, but I bought it at Whole Foods. Everything in Whole Foods is not good for you just because it came from there.
So true.
So we still read labels. We're still making sure there's not a ton of sugar. We're still making sure there's no additives. I know people who will go, say, with vegetarians. Well, I stopped eating meat, but now all I do is eat pasta and grains.
Right.
Well, it's
Pizza.
still not healthy. So just because it says gluten-free doesn't mean it's good for you. It's probably a better option, but now we still have to remember all the other things we want to avoid for inflammation. And that's part of it too. We go based off your food allergy list, and then we also remove gluten, but then there's just other foods that we know are not good for your health. So we avoid a lot of the processed sugars, we avoid artificial sugars, we try and avoid food colorings and additives and all those things that are inflammatory, which can still be in your gluten-free products. So just making sure you're always reading the labels and being smart about that. But there's a lot of good gluten-free products out there too. So if you're going to switch over the flours, the best place to start is coconut flour, almond flour, and I really like cashew flour. It's really sweet. It's probably my favorite. That's also what I prefer in milk. I prefer cashew milk over almond milk. I just think the flavor is better. But those ones are easy. Now let's talk about things like pasta. People get very, especially if you're a pasta lover, it's hard to give those things up. But there are alternatives that really taste similar. Now, some of them are going to taste different. So there's like a black bean pasta, which is great and tastes really good, but it doesn't taste exactly like your traditional noodle would. However, there is a brand, it's the POW brand, P-O-W. It's a lentil pasta, and I really don't taste much of a difference. I know you guys use those too, your kids like them just fine.
See, these pastas, they really absorb the taste of what you're cooking with.
Right.
You know, so if you're making good healthy sauces and things that go with it, you're really not going to notice the difference.
You're tasting more what's on top.
Absolutely.
And especially with the lentil pastas, they cook up the very similar consistency as a regular noodle would. Well, sometimes the black bean ones don't always cook up the same, but they give a little bit of a different flavor. So we do use them both. I prefer to use a black bean pasta if we're doing a stir fry, and I'll use a lentil pasta if we're trying to recreate more of a pasta type dish. But again, you can get those at Whole Foods. You can get them in all kinds of different places. There's a brand called Tolerant brand. They do red lentil pasta and black bean pasta. You can get those at Kroger or any of your grocery stores. I mean, you can find these things anywhere, so they're not tough to come by. You just need to try them out and then make your sauces and play with with them. So you're not destined to a life of never having pasta again. Just choose different ones. Thankfully, a lot of restaurants now have gluten-free menus or substitutes that you can do. So it's not even that you can't go out and eat. Just ask for those changes, especially with the flours and the pastas.
Yep, you got it. Yeah, we do a lot of things. Like instead of doing white rice, we'll do things like quinoa.
Yeah.
Quinoa. Those of you that like cereals, I mean, there's buckwheat cereals out there, hot and cold cereals. So there's just, again, when we first got into practice and we were first teaching people how to be gluten free, it was a lot harder.
It was a lot harder.
I mean, you had to go and make your own stuff all the time.
Yep.
But nowadays, again, I read something. 2004 is really when products started, changing.
Yep.
But again, really in the last 5 to 6 years, 7 years, it is not that hard. You just need to, again, just because it's gluten free, it's not healthy, and just knowing the grains that are gluten free and the grains that aren't. And maybe in the comments when this is over, we can kind of list out some of the non-gluten grains for you guys just to kind of help you out. But guys, gluten is just so detrimental to your health, and you really, especially for those kiddos, because guys, all the Lunchables and all these lunch things that we're feeding our kids, not only is it full of a lot of toxins, but it's just loaded with gluten. Not beating up on anybody, but you go to lunch and you spread your kids for lunch at school, and your heart just goes out to these kids, and usually it's because the parents don't know, but they're just they wonder why their kids can't focus and can't sit still and can't do things, and they're just they're eating foods that are just so detrimental to their health, guys. So again, we just really hope that you guys share this video around because a lot of people need to hear this.
Absolutely. And have a very happy, healthy hump day.
Right. Bye, guys. We'll see you next Wednesday.